Welcome to my brand new series where basically I'm going to be reviewing several films in the time that it would normally take me to review just one film. This isn't going to be replacing my normal reviews. I'm only planning on doing the whole mini review thing maybe once a month. I've not entirely decided yet. But what I've noticed since I've been doing my channel is that I watch way more horror films than I could ever get the chance to do full reviews for. There have been several occasions where I've watched a really cool film and then thought to myself, oh, I've got to do a review for this. And then I've thought, no, I can't. I've got like 3 other videos that I'm currently planning. So this series is meant to kind of mitigate that dilemma a little bit. It will give me the opportunity to put more of my film opinions onto the channel. I'd like to focus more on lesser known horror films for this series. I'd like to focus more on standalones because a lot of my full reviews do tend to be on the big franchises, the big movies for the most part. No, I didn't film this at midnight, by the way, if you're wondering. I know some light is probably coming through there, but that doesn't mean that you can't watch it at midnight. So technically, it's not false advertising. Right, let's get into it then. I'm not going to give scores for these films. I'm just going to sort of babble about them a little bit and then tell you about whether I recommend them or not. So let's find out what's first. So first up we've got Lost After Dark. This was released in 2014, but it's set in the 1980s. It's an attempt to capture the spirit of the golden generation of slashers. They've even scratched the film up a little bit deliberately just to make you feel like you're watching an old VHS tape. The plot's quite simple. It's a group of 8 or so youngsters who are off to one of their parents' houses in the countryside somewhere, but their minibus breaks down and they end up walking into this farmhouse in the middle of the woods, and there just happens to be a serial killer living there, and then voila, we're into our movie. The killer himself is quite boring, but the kills are quite gory and inventive. The characters are a lot of fun, and the order of the kills surprised me a bit. I can normally predict in horror films roughly who's going to die and when throughout a movie, but in this instance, they shake things up in that regard. Robert Patrick's in this movie as a teacher, kind of following on behind the kids, trying to catch up to them. He played the T-1000 in Terminator 2, and he's getting on in years a bit now, but he's got a fun little role here. There's some decent music. The ending is a little bit of a surprise. It feels more like the ending of a 70s film, though, rather than 80s film, I thought. But if you're into slasher films, I would absolutely recommend giving this one a try. This is what I would call a novelty film. We see the whole thing through this one girl's computer screen as she just randomly surfs the internet one night. So if she moves the cursor to change the music on her playlist, we see that happening. If she goes into Facebook to do something in there, we see that happening. And the movie really kicks into gear when she joins this Skype chat room to hang out with her friends and shoot the shit. But this one guy comes in who nobody knows. He's not even got a picture on there, so they can't even see whether it's a man or a woman or whatever. And he or she starts freaking everybody out, and they can't evict him from the chat room for some reason. And before long, this group of friends are embroiled in this weird game where they're all having to confess their deepest, darkest sins. And it turns out that a lot of them have shafted each other and stuff, so they've been sleeping with each other's boyfriends and doing the dirty on each other, and they all start getting mad. And this random stranger is making them do this, who may or may not be supernatural. I'm not going to give that away. He's somehow able to make sure that if they don't play by the rules, that they die. Now, this film is certainly interesting. I wouldn't say that it massively grabbed me. I mean, by the halfway point, I just wanted to come out of this computer screen and watch the action unfold from more normal camera angles, if you see what I mean. You don't really get to see the kills very well, but as a one-off experience, I thought it was quite novel, and I would certainly watch the sequel. Apparently there's a sequel called Unfriended Dark Web. I'm interested to know whether they just follow the same pattern in terms of how it's filmed, or whether they've got some other kind of unique idea. This is probably my favourite film that I've discovered that I'm talking about in this video. It's a found footage film. It's about this group of people. They're not youngsters. I'd say they're sort of like mid to late 20s. And at the start, they get in a van and start traveling across the southern part of America. I think they start off in like Florida and they're heading towards Texas. It's Halloween week in the story, and what they're doing is they're traveling around extreme haunted houses because they're really interested in this stuff. And every place they go to seems to be a little bit more extreme than the last. They're filming it all on their camcorders. So the whole film has got a little bit of a documentary feel, because I'm pretty sure that the places they're going to are actually real haunted houses, real attractions, because there's just too many extras in each of these places for a low budget film like this to have set all that up. And I found this film completely fascinating. I mean, if it had not had the final act that it did and was just a straight documentary for an hour and a half, I still would have really enjoyed it and wanted to watch it again. Out of all the films I've seen today, I think this one is probably the one that I will watch again the quickest. I'm tempted to buy it, actually. The final act is when it feels like it has to move into proper horror film territory, you know, and finally they end up at an extreme haunted house, which might be taking things a little bit too far. And there's a nice ambiguous ending, but this film just had me gripped all the way through. It's really good. So if you like found footage and you like extreme haunted houses, which I personally have had an interest in ever since I saw the film Haunt last year, then you will probably enjoy this. Now, I saw the original Hitcher 30 years ago, and I've only just got around to watching the remake, which I believe came out maybe 10 years ago. I'm not exactly sure. I've never had any enthusiasm for watching it, but I saw it on Netflix the other night and I thought, oh, go on then. Now, I've got to say, Sean Bean really impressed me. I mean, it's not easy to replicate the performance of Rutger Hauer in the original, but Bean does a really good job. And Sophia Bush as the final girl, I guess, is absolutely amazing. I mean, I remember her from my time of briefly watching Chicago PD a few years ago. This is the first time I've seen her in anything since then, and she is absolutely awesome, it's got to be said. No disrespect to Jennifer Jason Leigh, I believe, was the main girl in the first film, but Sophia Bush just absolutely kills it. So between Sean Bean's excellent performance and Sophia Bush's excellent performance, this is not a bad film at all. Where it falls down is the middle section, because the middle section for about 30-40 minutes just completely copies the original film, and that was when I got bored for the longest time. I'm not interested in films just copying films. But the first act does its own thing. It feels like original material. It could be an entirely different movie. I enjoyed that. And the finale had a different feel to it as well, even though events were loosely similar to the original film. So I've got to say, on the whole, it was a bit of a mixed bag, but certainly not the worst remake I've ever seen. And if I absolutely wanted to watch a Hitcher film in future, I'd be sort of torn, I think, between the old one and the new one. And so we arrive at probably the first film today that I wouldn't recommend. Now, I will admit that I knew nothing about this movie coming into it. I didn't even know what the threat was. I didn't know what the subgenre was. The reason I put it on is because I was scrolling through some films on Sky and I came across this one that had Alexandra Daddario on the front of it, and I thought, she was really great in Texas Chainsaw 3D. I'm going to watch this. It's got Logan Miller in it as well, who's currently getting some fame for Escape Room. So some decent people in the cast. And for the first 30 minutes, I was really into this because we follow these three sort of rock chicks as they go to this concert, and they keep hearing reports about these mysterious cultists killing people in the area. And I thought, oh, this could be really good. This could be a combination of like Texas Chainsaw and Race with the Devil or something like that. But at a certain point, the film completely does a 180. It just shows you one thing and then gives you something else. It does the rope-a-dope on you, because it turns out that the threat in the film is from within the whole time. Now, that's not necessarily the death knell for any given movie, but it just wasn't what I wanted from this movie. I wanted the cultists that were teased in the first sort of 20-30 minutes. I didn't want them to go down the avenue that they did. So once I twigged as to what was going on, what was really going on with these characters that we were following, I was kind of like, oh, right, well, I've watched it this far, I might as well finish it off. So I sat through the final hour. There was some good bits here and there to close things out, but wasn't really my thing, and honestly, the final 30 minutes of this, it's very chaotic. It's like a horror version of Lock, Stock, you know, characters bumping into characters, new characters being introduced and bumping into other characters, so that's why they die. It's kind of like a weird kind of horror movie chaos theory experiment or something. It's a bit all over the place. It's sort of fun, and it's not the most terribly written film I've ever seen. Alexandra Daddario absolutely puts a shift in, but not for me. And like I said, I wouldn't recommend this one. This is another fairly weak one, and even if you did take it upon yourself to watch it, be careful about which Scarecrows film you watch, because I've discovered there are quite a few films called Scarecrow or Scarecrows. I think there might even be 2 films with Scarecrows in the title just from 2018 alone. This particular one is about this group of 4 people who they want to find this lagoon that one of them's heard about to go swimming in the middle of the summer. But to get to this lagoon, they've got to pass through these acres of land which are owned by this psychotic guy who doesn't want people trespassing on his land, because trespassers came on his land once and killed his wife. So now he kills anybody else who comes onto his land. He's got this kind of farmhouse, ranch type place. He's got rows of cornfields. So we spend lots of time in this movie walking through corn or walking past the corn. It's a good setting for a horror film, but it just doesn't do anything with it. The first half is easily the best half. It's kind of fun watching these 4 characters go on this potential swimming trip, and their interactions with each other are kind of fun. But once we get into the second half of the movie, there is nothing to enjoy. I mean, the horror part of this film is just dull. The location is not used very well. The killer's boring. Out of these 4 people who we're following, most of them just die without even getting a chance to fight back or do anything. It's left to one girl, and it's a chore to watch from like the halfway point onwards. And that's no good for a horror film. So Scarecrows is not for me at all. And just by randomly surfing, I discovered that this film is actually free to watch on YouTube. I watched it on Amazon Prime, I think, but yeah, it's literally on YouTube, free to watch if you wanted to give it a shot. But it's definitely not one of the best films in this that I'm talking about in this video today. So for our final film today, we've got a really cool one. This gives us a chance to go out with a bang. I didn't deliberately leave this one till last. I have talked about these films today in the exact order that I've watched them over the past couple of weeks. And similar to Scarecrows, you need to be careful about which revenge film you watch, because I'm pretty sure there would have been several films with this title that have been released over the years. I can think of one off the top of my head with Kevin Costner in it, and doubtless there are more. It's just that kind of title that I feel would be reused a lot. There's a TV show called Revenge, I know that. This particular one came out in 2017. I believe it was a French director who did it, and it's about this girl who, she's seeing this guy who takes her to this lodge in the desert to meet his 2 chums, and because they're going on a hunting trip or something. I'm not sure if it's set in like Nevada or Arizona, but anyway, this girl gets raped and left for dead by these 3 guys. They didn't set out to do that. It's kind of like a chain of events where things kind of escalate from one innocent situation, seemingly innocent situation, to something else, and then something else. And before you know it, this girl is lying on the desert bedrock with, you know, something sticking out of her, and she's been raped and left for dead. And these guys have to basically finish her off, because they know that if she gets away and gets to the police, then they're all in trouble. So for the rest of the movie, this girl is having to kind of heal herself at the same time that she's running away from these guys. She's got to try and get weapons and try and fight back. And I guess it's a kind of rape revenge film, but it's not comparable to some of the other rape revenge films that I just happen to have seen, like I Spit on Your Grave. This film is leagues above something like that. It's a really classy film. This film could have won Oscars for like best direction and best cinematography, stuff like that. If the Oscars weren't so snobby, that is, you know, they don't like horror films and films like this, but it's such a cool movie. It's absolutely gorgeous to look at. It plays out in a very realistic way. You know, there's 1 or 2 moments that, you know, stretch believability, but it never goes too far. It's really gritty, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm not sure it's the most rewatchable of films. I I don't see myself going back to this, but certainly if I was giving this the full review treatment, I would have given it an excellent score. So that brings us to the end of my mini reviews video for today. I would say that The Houses of Halloween is my favourite of the 7 that I've talked about. But on a technical level, Revenge is probably the best. But Houses of Halloween is personally the one that I'm going to go back to the most, I think. Right, I'll be back soon, who knows, with a volume 2. And I think my next video after this will probably be a more normal review, but we will see. Until next time, ciao.